Welcome to podcast 47 in the series of Who Let the Master Out. Last episode, we finished up the segment on the knowing. And for those experiences, it seemed the knowledge about things and people came into my head like I was remembering something that had already happened. What I want to talk about today is when we receive information about others, but it is through seeing it in our heads. We see a vision pop into that theater in our minds where daydreaming kind of happens. Seeing visions. I know that term sounds spooky, but really, as humans, we are more apt to communicate and remember through images. So it makes sense that this would be a method that Spirit uses to supply us knowledge by dropping a scene or a little short film into our head. I have had many situations where I've received flashes of emotions or scenes playing in my head while speaking with someone on the phone, in person, and even over the internet. Yes, even over the internet. It's crazy, huh? I can feel like I'm actually sitting across from the person while I'm chatting online or on text or on Messenger or whatever it might be. And I'd like to share some of the incredible experiences I've had. And as I've mentioned previously, when I talk about my own situations, I'm sharing them because I've been instructed to show you that there is always more. So you could see some of the ways that it happens. And again, by no means are we limited to how these experiences happen. So my first interaction on the internet ever, when I knew things about a complete stranger, blew my socks off, and it kind of freaked me out. And this was back in the day when public chat rooms were the new rave, and you didn't have pictures or details, and everyone basically just had a screen name, and that's all you had. And on this particular day, I received a private message from a man, and we'll call him Rick for the purposes of this story. And he asked me how I was doing, and I told him I was doing well, and I asked him how he was in return, and he replied that he was also well, and that was the end of any kind of normalcy in that conversation, because the knowing began to stir within me. I told him that it seemed like he was lost and that he wasn't sure what he wanted to do with his life. And of course, that really could apply to 99% of most people. So it was no big surprise when he replied that, yes, that was his current state of being. And then my fingers started typing faster than my brain was comprehending. I asked him why he quit nursing school. And Rick responded, "Who is this?" He actually thought I was a friend of his playing a joke on him because he had indeed been in nursing school and dropped out. Ooh. I replied that I just kind of know things sometimes, to which he responded that if I knew things, then I should tell him his 3 greatest passions. And in that moment, I had a flash vision of a kitchen full of plants with arts and crafts all over the walls. Now cut me some slack with this next part because I was new to this. And I told him I saw plants and I saw the arts and the crafts, but I couldn't quite place the third thing. Well, duh, as you probably already guessed. It turns out what I was looking at was a gourmet kitchen, and he loved gourmet cooking. And I told him, well, that would explain the kitchen I saw, and I felt like this urge to describe the kitchen to him. The island, the tile color, the window placement, and where the pots and pans were hanging and all of that. And he replied that I was describing his sister's kitchen to a T, and that's where he loved cooking gourmet meals. Now, when Rick mentioned his sister, I had a flash of a blonde woman crying while laying on a bed in front of a large picture window. And I told him this, and he confirmed that, yep, that was his sister, and she was crying a lot because of her husband. And at that point, I flashed to a scene of her husband standing over her, and I knew that the problem they were having was the husband's jealousy of the relationship Rick had with his sister. And he replied that I was right on the money. He said that it was nothing like his sister-in-law. Well, when he mentioned his sister-in-law, then I saw a flash of this red-haired woman and described her as an, I guess, aggressive person. I felt that one would be glad to have her in their corner because she would knife someone for you if they threatened you. She was that kind of person. Well, by this point, Rick was freaking out a bit, and I can't blame him. And he said it turned out that his sister-in-law had just dyed her hair from blonde to red, so she was indeed a redhead now. And he mentioned that he didn't get along with her husband, his brother, though. And then I was then flooded with visions of interactions between his brother and their father. And I knew that because of that dynamic, none of them were on speaking terms with each other. And he confirmed this and said it had to do with his nephew. And then I knew about his nephew. And I knew it was because his nephew was gay. And I told him that. And he flipped out. He typed, "How could you know that?" There's a bit more that happened during that conversation. It's crazy. But at the conclusion of the interaction, I told him that the reason I had been given this information was because I saw this huge family gathering, and Rick was standing back away from everyone behind the couch, separated from them all. His family was divided. And we had bumped into each other in this moment in order for me to tell him that now was the time that he acted as their patriarch. He was to be the one to regather and ignite the healing of the family. It was time for him to stop his little pity party for himself and step up to the plate. And that was what he needed to hear. So after we said our goodbyes, I logged off and I just sat there letting it all sink in. So, wow, it was crazy. But that was just the beginning. Not long after that event, I felt the urge to help another person online. After I started telling him about himself and we kind of went through that little phase, he began to quiz me about his friends. He would state a first name and I would get a quick flash of an emotional picture of them. So for this name, a kind, sensitive individual, felt like a female energy, brown hair. And he gave me that name, strong, forceful leader type, male energy, but it felt like it was a female. It was a lesbian. The list of names he gave me just went on and on and on, and every single one of them was exactly correct. And I feel that there was a clarity because I went into the situation without any expectations, no fear, no noise distorting the information. I was sitting in a pocket of unconditional love, just letting things flow to me. And we can just be open to what messages come to us. We learn to trust what we see and feel as we decipher which voice is from our brain and which is from spirit. One will always be proven to be truth, the one that is always correct. The other will be a hit and miss with logic and fear messing with the perception. I give you the examples that we just talked about to demonstrate that it is not necessary to have a physical symbol or object in front of us in order to connect with knowledge from the other side. I sometimes sit around a fire pit or a campfire with my friends, and they may eventually ask, "So, Den, what are the whispers telling you?" And that's their way of asking, what are the voices of spirit in my head sharing with me about them and their lives? Now, our fear ego lives in our brain, and our brain wants to rise above fear. And it can do this by becoming grounded in unconditional love. Now, the journey can be easier if our physical eyes do have something to see, and thereby kind of connect the spiritual to the physical world. It kind of anchors it here. And that is where tarot cards, or as I like to call them, soul cards, are useful. Having spent much of my teenage and early adult years practicing the Christian religion, I understand that there are fears associated with using these cards. But I also realize that, like a knife, it isn't the physical object that is the concern. It is the user's intention that matters. And, in the Christian Bible, God actually talked through a donkey, so what makes us believe we should limit him from using a deck of cards to help people on their journey back to unconditional love? One of my favorite passages in the Christian Bible is 2 Timothy 1:7 that says, "For God hath not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind." We have a kaleidoscope of opportunities that can come our way. And I feel that I've had such a variety of different types of experiences because in the beginning, I didn't read a lot of books or join groups to find out how all of these things were supposed to work. Because of that, I was free to wander unrestricted. Like, I'm not sure if you've seen the movie What Dreams May Come with Robin Williams in there, but he was able to wander to places in heaven and in hell that others hadn't because he didn't have a strong belief about what he couldn't do there. So trust your heart and do not fear. You are a powerful, supernatural, eternal spirit being made from unconditional love. In the next episode, I'm going to share a brief story of when my love energy was ignited to kind of this next level, and a couple of short stories about how spirit communicated through the use of soul cards. And until then, you masters, find your freedom, strut your bigness, because we're all giants in a world of giants who've been taught that we're weak and that we're small. But it's time to shine. It's time to be that master who lives inside you.